It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, April 16th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that hope to end the home season on a slightly better note, if not a loss for draft purposes.
Yeah, I would say the fans felt that way too at the end when they booed.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And to keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials. And of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, this is our last post game with you in the car in the Wells Fargo Center parking lot of the season. It's a momentous occasion because even if we do this in the future, it won't be the Wells Fargo Center parking lot. It'll be some other name, right?
It will. Yep. It'll be different branding for sure.
Yeah. So kind of bittersweet about that, just like the game we saw. We are going to get to the news about the Alex Bump ELC as well as the Devin Kaplan ELC. We're going to talk about both of those later in the show as it relates to kind of the changes in the junior hockey rules these days. Plus, we're going to get to your mailbag questions. But wow, what a stinker for your last home game of the season.
I mean, it was interesting because, like, at first, Columbus didn't look like they really wanted the game for like half of the first period. And so then it was kind of like, what's going on here? Jack Reeves certainly played well, but he didn't steal this game. This was a game where Flyers players got frustrated to the point where they just kind of stopped doing their thing. And so, like, we saw Forster missing the net. We saw Tippett falling down, missing the net. We saw Konechny taking some shots on goal, which was good, but getting saved and then showing the frustration, And so I think that built up to the point where they kind of were like just spent by the third period. They weren't even getting anything going at that point.
No, and of course, like you said, Columbus is an extremely motivated team. They have to win out to make the playoffs, and of course, Montreal needs to lose as well,
right,
for them to make it. But they're doing their part to get themselves in it if they can, and so that, of course, was a lot of it as well. Because I think one of the things that Sean Couturier noted post game was that they weren't getting second chances on any of their rush opportunities, and Columbus was. And I think that was a huge difference.
And a big thing is, Dante Fabro got a goal in this game, and he was waived from the Predators. So any team could have gotten him. So that means the Flyers could have gotten him too. They would have had first chance way before Columbus, and they didn't. And he's playing up on the top pairing with Zach Werenski and making a big difference this whole season. So it just shows you that sometimes moves that aren't made, these are things. Sometimes you have to take advantage of these things.
Yeah. And speaking of Werenski, we talked about him in the pregame, and how big of an impact he has. He had 12 shot attempts in this game. Absolutely insane. At that point, when I checked the stat, which was about a third of the way through the third period, right?
Crazy.
The Flyers had the same number of shot attempts with their entire blue line.
Wow.
Like, matched up against Werenski. I think it wound up that Werenski didn't get any more, so he wound up with 12, and the Flyers blue line had 15 by the end of the game. But still, like, those numbers don't add up well for the Flyers.
No, that was crazy. And he's a good guy. Like, in the locker room, he was signing a stick for somebody.
Sure.
Like this is just like, these guys they're motivated. Whether they can do it, I don't know, but I think they might be able to.
Yeah. The other big question I had in that game is, like, why were the Flyers blocking shots like that? Like, to what end at this
Yeah, I'm
point?
not sure. I was puzzled at that, but I'll tell you what I was even more puzzled at. I was more puzzled at why were two guys standing on the other side of the blue line right before the zone entry on the power play and then jumped on sides as the person bringing up the puck. Did they, and they like they're all together at that point when they enter the zone. What did they think that was going to do? Did they think that that was good? I'm not sure what that was.
I don't know either. And it's the special teams, I think, was like if you wanted a prime example of how the Flyers special teams have failed them this season, I think this game was a perfect example of that.
Yes.
Like that exact situation, the fact that the Flyers were 0 for 3 on the power play, didn't really get much going on them.
Well,
And
there
then
was a point on the power play, not to interrupt, sorry. Michkov and Brink almost collided on the power play on the last one. Like, they
they
didn't even know where they were supposed to be.
yeah, it was a mess. Like their power play was just non-functional. And then of course, they let in a power play goal, which turns
Yeah,
out to be the game-winning goal
of course.
i- in the situation. So, I think there is a lot of good stuff happening with the Flyers. It's
Sure.
just like they can't put a lot of good games together, or they haven't been able to this season until very recently. And even the wins haven't been what I would call excellent games for
Right.
them. They've won and they've scored a lot of goals in some of them, but they weren't necessarily the best team performances either.
No,
And
that's true.
so, yeah, and I think the part of it being the last home game, I would have liked to have seen them play better just to leave the fans, like, a taste of something
Yeah, they
good to look
deserved it.
forward to, right?
Yeah, they deserved a little better. They did. One note. So Adam Fantilli scored his 30th goal, and
Yeah.
so we're asking him about it in the locker room, and he said, yesterday I was in Toronto. I buried my grandfather, and he said he was a Philly fan. So we took that as a Flyers
Oh,
fan, and he was like, I know this sounds like something like I'm not trolling. This is the truth, and I think he was kind of there helping me get that goal. And that was really something. Like that's probably the last thing we were all expecting to hear, to be honest.
that is really sweet and
Yeah,
very special. Like, uh, 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 don't make me feel things like this about the
I
opposing
didn't expect
players,
to
Russ.
feel
How
things.
dare
I know. I came into that locker room hardened. I didn't expect to hear that. I was just like, all right, let's see what a sort of playoff team, almost playoff team, sounds like in the locker room. That's what I was after.
Yeah, I can imagine. I will say on a slightly positive note, it was very clear that Tyson Forster wants that 25th goal. Like he was
Sure.
working really hard to get it.
Hmm.
It didn't happen, obviously, but I think that is a good thing. I think, that line had some really good rushes.
Hmm.
I just think, you know, Jet Greaves had a really excellent
Yeah, he
performance
had
in
a
this.
good game. Like he wasn't like impenetrable, but he had a good game. Like there's no question he played a solid net.
Yeah, he absolutely did for sure. We're going to talk about the game against Buffalo
Yep.
on tomorrow's show, the last game of the season and the implications then, but it very interesting times in Flyers land, including the team awards. We're going to dig more into those things on tomorrow's show,
Hmm.
just to kind of separate it out a little bit, give it its due, and maybe throw in some extra awards that we would give
Yeah,
that
that's good.
maybe
I like
don't
that.
don't exist. So stay tuned for that. But one game left, y'all. We did it. and we're going to talk about the new guys because there's old new guys at this point now, in Alex Bump, who's going to head to Lehigh Valley, and Devin Kaplan, who is going to play one game for the Flyers on the road in Buffalo, it seems. We're going to
Yep.
do that coming up next. Ever check your bank account and wonder where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's sometimes easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app. Monarch Money is a complete financial command center. You can track all those accounts, your investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. And when I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery, and now I can budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch for everything to check those finances and track those extra expenses like that extra takeout. You can even plan long term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code locked on NHL for half your first year. On tomorrow's show, it will be the last game of the season.
This
I
is it.
cannot believe it. So we're going to give our sort of preliminary end of season thoughts, talk about those team awards that they handed out, and touch base with draft eligible prospect Jackson Smith, who's a defenseman in the WHL. Really excited to talk about him in our series of looking at draft eligible prospects. As we mentioned earlier in the show, we got a couple of bits of news about the prospect signings that we've been talking about for a little bit. Well, one of them at least. We got word via Elliot Friedman that the decision they were going to make with Alex Bump was to sign him to an ATO for Lehigh this year and then sign the ELC to have it start next year. And that is pretty much what we wanted, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best case scenario for him. I guess he didn't have, all that much leverage because there was only one game left. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of hard to force the team to play for a game. But then we're going to talk about that in a minute, how sometimes it's different for some and different for others. So, yeah, I think playing in the AHL is good for him. I think he needs to spend next year in the AHL too. So this is fine.
Yeah, I think so. Now, the surprise, of course, was the Devin Kaplan signing. They made that official, and he is going to burn a year of an ELC. So they basically got him for 2 years. Man, kudos to Devin Kaplan's agent because
Absolutely.
like, that is some good work there. We have talked multiple times over the course of this year that we really thought he needed another year at Boston University, that, at least I thought he had improved a lot in the tournament
He did.
overall and, had played much better than we'd seen him earlier in the year, but that we thought he really needed another year of college. But Flyers decided otherwise, and he is going to start his pro career. And I think he'll end up playing one game with the Flyers.
Yeah, he'll play one game to burn the ELC. So that's what will happen. Look, I do think he was better in the tournament. I still think he's sort of a role player. I guess, they're going with the size factor here. That's fine. I mean, you do have to have guys in your system and everything. I don't think he's going to be a top 6 NHLer at any stretch in his career. So, but that's fine. You need these other guys, and we'll see what he does. And yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that he got to burn a year of ELC, but hey, it's fine.
Yeah, and he got some performance bonuses to boot for the next
Mhm.
couple of years. So
Yeah.
good for him. And
Yeah.
I certainly hope it works out. And I am assuming he'll be with Lehigh Valley next year. And that's the right path. And I think it'll be great, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely make Lehigh Valley better.
Yeah, I think so. If he wasn't going to go back to BU, that's the right option
Yes.
there for sure. Now, switching gears to talk about the changes in junior and NCAA and all of that has been happening. All of these decisions that like just happened with Alex Bump and Devin
Mhm.
Kaplan and other junior players, Jet Luchenko. All of these rules have been changing over the last year or so, and will probably change some more. But
Mhm.
from what we know, like with the old rules, players had to choose the CHL or NCAA. If you chose CHL hockey, you gave up your NCAA eligibility.
Right.
USHL players, however, could transfer to the NCAA as an American Junior League. They could
Right.
transfer to the NCAA. So some international players and a lot of USA players chose to go that route because it did allow them that transfer option there, right?
So things, yeah, that part is cemented. Like that part has been changed for a few months, and they can do it, and players are starting to do it. So as an example,
Well, those were the old rules, right?
yeah, the old
So
rules you stated, and then as far as the CHL now being able to go to NCAA hockey,
correct.
that's within the last couple of months,
Right, that
and
happened in January.
yeah, and so with that, you're already starting to see the effect. I can give you an example. A really good Michigan player, TJ Hughes. I was on his conference call the other day. I'll put out an article soon on that. And basically, he went back. He's a free agent, but he went back. He went back and he talked about a player they're getting from the queue. And so that's something that couldn't happen before. And he's excited about that. And so that's something now that has changed the path for all these different leagues simply because like you're not stuck in one league anymore. Now, you could say they may have too much freedom and maybe it's going to hurt each and every one of those leagues, but I always feel like the players should have the power because it's their career. So players have more choices now, which I always think is good.
Right. Now, the exception is that if you're a CHL junior hockey player, but you've signed an ELC, you can't then go to the
Right. No,
NCAA.
that
Like
that
that is
that you're ineligible at that point. Yes.
so from the Flyers perspective, a guy like Spencer Gill, he can't go to play college hockey now. He's either going to stick with his junior team or come to the Flyers
Or
organization
go
when it's age
overseas, and
appropriate.
once in a while that
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
Right, when it's age appropriate depending
Right.
on those rules, right?
Yes.
So, what that did in effect is really knock down the USHL a peg
Mhm.
because they had had this sort of exclusive right to younger players who could
Yes.
then transfer to college. Now they're on the even playing field with CHL, but CHL has a ton more resources available to them because Canada puts, a metric ton of money
Right.
into those teams and they're a business,
Yeah,
right?
with their stipend and they have a they get a
Mhm.
they also get an education in Canada after if they take part in it, but there's like a time limit on that, and you could, so you have to use it or you lose it. But they do get that, and they do get money too.
Right. So recently, Frank Saravalli has suggested that they are very close to an agreement to try and level that playing field. So
Mhm.
USHL, the NHL, and USA Hockey are going to invest in the USHL to try and raise it to a similar level as the CHL to attract whether it's American players or players from abroad, like they've been getting over the last several years to be kind of on a level playing field with the CHL in terms of attracting players to their junior league. And I think I think that'll be really good. I think it's important for the USHL to be on a level playing field. It just also begs the question, like, is there at some point going to be a super league where it won't be the CHL anymore? It'll just be junior hockey, and the USHL will be another division like the WHL versus the OHL
No,
versus
I
the
don't think it'll
Q.
be like that. For a few reasons. For one, we always forget not everybody's American or Canadian, and so like the USHL does attract Russians now. They attract Finnish players, Swedish players. So, but they generally attract the ones that know they're going to go to college at some point. Those are the
Right.
ones they attract. I still think that path is going to exist because college, like I go to the Fall Classic every year, and like so many college coaches, scouts, all those people are there, always talking to the players, always recruiting, doing all of that, right? But some of these other top players now, they may not get as many. And I thought, maybe they're going to have to start getting a little younger to kind of get them earlier before all that happens. But I don't think that's necessarily the case now. So I think now with the right amount of money and with NIL money for colleges, some hockey's not as big as other sports, but some Now I think that that path is still going to exist because, and I'm not throwing shade on Canadian universities. They're fine. But I'm just saying there are some universities here in the US that are looked at as some of the best worldwide. And if you could get into one of those, even as a player from overseas, your parents are going to push you to do that. They're not going to go for the money. They're going to go for the, hey, I want you to be educated and play hockey. And so there's still always going to be that factor. Remember, these are still kids we're talking about. And sometimes the parents will lead them that way because they want them to have a fallback.
Yeah, I mean, I see that for sure. I just think that it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in
Yep.
real time, especially to your point with the NIL discussion and the transfer portal with like guys being able to move around
Yeah.
a lot more freely from year to year to go where they're, best
You want to get more
in
ice time. You don't want to be a
opportunity.
fourth liner. You want to be a second liner, those
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think, I don't think it affects drafting, for the Flyers, side of things in terms of who you pick, but it could affect player development in terms of finding the right path and when that player is gonna join the organization.
I'll tell you when it affects drafting. If you're drafting a player that, let's say, is top 10 in the draft and goes to college, if that guy happens to have a big name, like let's just say Gavin McKenna were to go to a US college, he's not, but let's just say he
Mhm.
was. Gavin McKenna might get there, and let's just say he's at college X. And college X says, hey, Gavin, this is your lucky day. We just signed all of these sponsors. This is how much money you're going to make this year while you're playing in college. And he might say, ooh, I was thinking about going into the NHL right away. Now I might think about it for a little while because an ELC only gets me, 80, 90 grand. You're giving me more to play college hockey and get an education. So there's going to be some players that are going to have that advantage where that money outpaces an ELC and could take a little longer for a player to come into the league. And that could affect the way you might draft them based on when you interview them at the combine.
All right, fair enough. It'll be interesting to see how all of this develops and if this change for the USHL becomes official. There will be a lot of questions to come out of that. And speaking of questions, y'all have some great ones for the end of the season thoughts related to the Flyers. We're going to talk about those coming up next.
The NHL playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists in the NBA or goals and assists in the NHL, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after puck drop, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Hey, I might bet the Colorado Avalanche. If they're getting Gabe Landeskog back and he's anything close to what he was, could be good to bet on. Don't miss out. Head to fanduel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
All right, diving into our mailbag here. The first thing we have to talk about is our episode when we talked about is it a bad or a good thing that the Flyers have been winning and earning points? You all are 100% on board with it being a bad idea and certainly understand that
Oh, I get it.
because of the draft position changes that have happened. And, this whole thing with the Sabres game being the last one and them being so close. Like, we'll talk more about
It
that
hits
on
you right in the
tomorrow's show.
face. Like there's just no way
It
around
does.
it.
It does. So, can't disagree with everybody who was in our comments lamenting the Flyers winning. Like I said, it was fun for a little bit, but then it got kind of like, come on, guys, like, what are we doing here? So, totally understood there. Brendan sent us an email about Clean Out Day, which is coming up at the end of the week and says, I expect we will find out that Travis Konechny is dealing with an upper body injury of some sort that is limiting his shot. I think Brink will be told to build up strength and power skating Mitchkov's same.
Yeah, I don't know about Konechny because if he gets announced that he's going to the Worlds, then that part's off. So maybe there's a chance of that. Brink for sure. I mean, Brink still has things to work on.
Yeah.
And yeah, for sure with Michkov and his skating. Again, I don't know how much improvement Michkov will make over one summer with that. He doesn't need a ton. It's not a problem for him. Let's just put it that way. If he gets more speed, hey, great. But it's not a problem. So I'm not really that worried about it.
Yeah, he's able to find space no matter what once he
Right.
gets in the zone, so and does amazing things with the puck, so I think I agree with you on that front, but I do think that there will be some noticeable changes after a full off season in North
Sure.
America with that training,
Yeah, I think
it'll
with
just
the way he eats,
tweaks.
the way he trains,
Mhm.
he'll I would think he comes in looking in better shape, those kinds of things.
Correct. Tyson Forster, we talked about him and did kind of a mini analysis of his season. And Joseph DeAngelis asked about that segment. One reason why the Flyers shot totals are down this year is because the Flyers played a more conservative style compared to last year due to the inferior goaltending. The Flyers had the entire season. Bad goaltending leads to more conservative play.
I think there's some of that, but if you have a good defensive structure, you can get shots and create shots from those chances. I think they've been getting less and less chances, shots on net on the penalty kill. They used to get a ton, and now they're getting few. They're getting a couple of a game. So I think there's that. The power play is supposed to produce shots and doesn't produce enough shots on net for sure. Like we've chronicled that all year. So I think it's a combination of those three things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, you know, they play more conservatively sometimes in front of their goalie. It depends on who it is.
Right.
So
That's true
I
too.
think there's a little bit of that as well, but it is a fair point that it is definitely part of the mix for sure. Eugene says, enjoy your analysis of the Flyers. Why is it so hard to find an average netminder? It's so frustrating as a fan to watch subpar goalies.
I get it. But you're not the only team. Like the Edmonton Oilers are going into the playoffs and they're like, which Stuart Skinner are we getting? Like it's hard.
Mm,
It's really hard. And so it's one of those things where I say you have to draft goaltending every year. You have to always try and develop it. And you can't say, oh, look, now we're set in goal because we have 3 or 4 goalies in the system. Because you never know who's going to work out. Goaltending is voodoo. It's very hard. They're not the only team that is having trouble with it.
yeah, and we talked about the Columbus Blue Jackets
Yeah.
in our preview for yesterday's game. I mean, it's been a big part of why they're borderline playoff as opposed to guaranteed
Right.
playoff,
Yeah, they're going with
right?
Jack Greaves now. He's got 19 games in the NHL, but he's won a few. So they're like, all right,
Yeah.
you keep going in.
Sounds very familiar to what the Flyers were doing with Sam Ersson
Yeah.
when he first started.
Yeah.
So, you know, it happens sometimes, but you got to find yourself a Dustin Wolf, I guess,
You do. But
is
he
the
was
answer.
years in the making. He was years in the AHL.
Yeah.
And then when he won AHL goalie of the year, you're like, all right, he's getting there. He's almost there. So yes,
Yeah.
you do have to find someone like that.
Yep, exactly. And Seamus asks us about the upcoming draft. Who are the best Russian MHL prospects this year with 7 picks slated to be in the top 50? There's no way they can use them all, much less on North American talent. They're going to be forced to take some overseas players so they can retain their rights.
Yeah, that
And
one I'm not going to have an answer for right now. I might dig into a little bit more of that just to have kind of draft notes, but I'm only doing a top 32 based on the draft, what I have to do. I'm not even doing 45 this year. So I'm not going to have a lot of those guys, to be honest. So, but that's not to slag the MHL. It's just to say right now, I don't have one for you.
yeah, I think, you know, there was a comment underneath it
Mhm.
from our frequent listener, Guido Valenti, who always has some really cool things to say, by the way, who suggested Alexander Zorofsky, who's a 6'1" center. And, you know, he is kind of rated in the second round right now, mid
Okay.
late second round, I would say.
I haven't watched
And
any video on him yet.
right, right. You know, I think the MHL you have to take with a grain of salt,
You do.
to a
I mean, when
large
you see a guy like
degree.
Michkov, right, and they're in the MHL, or Demidov, who you saw yesterday when
Mhm.
they're in the MHL, when they pop there. Then you see what happens when they go to the KHL. If they pop in both
Exactly.
places, great. But I see a lot of guys popping in the MHL and then they don't pop anywhere else. So you do have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt. But it's, but it is a stepping stone, and that player may be a really good player. I haven't dug into even what my second round might be yet because I just haven't. It's too early for that. I've just been honing like my top 38 or so, and that's it.
Right. And, this guy, for instance, I think with the top Russian prospects, we would see a game or two at least in the KHL at this
Yes.
point, even for the 18-year-olds who this,
Yeah,
Zarovsky.
usually they give him
Mm.
something.
Yeah, and he doesn't have like a KHL organization listed, at least
Yeah,
of
see,
his
so that's another thing where I'd have to
prospects
I'll look
yet.
at some
But
video. I'll, maybe I can report back in another few weeks, but not there yet.
right. So I think, they will definitely be casting a wide net for all these picks and probably trading some of these picks
Here's one
as
thing I can
well.
report, though. Cam Robinson said this on our EP meeting that he had heard now that some Russians will definitely make their way to the NHL Combine. So that's
Yeah.
good. So that's something where, that hasn't really been happening unless they've been over here in the States for a while. That's why they had that whole thing. Remember that whole Demidov workout in Florida? And then we all found out, hey, he's 6'1". When did he become 6'1"? So maybe there'll be less of that. So maybe in May I'll have a better beat on some of those kinds of guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will certainly be talking more about the draft as it approaches. Of course, as I have said many times, we have our spreadsheet of all of the guys we have covered so far. You can keep track of them. The link is in the show notes and pinned to our Blue Sky and Twitter profile. So check it out. We do have our last game of the season versus the Sabres to talk about tomorrow, and we will do that and so much more. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can send in those mailbag questions or Flyers thoughts on any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale with NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.